Okay, so let's start back to your childhood, Sunny as a child.
Okay.
What were some of the first glimmers of you being an entrepreneur?
I mean, I always say that there was nothing, but then when I think about it, there's always some stories that actually come out. I think the interesting one that you latched onto was there was one time my parents bought like a giant bag of like gummy strawberries, and I brought them to the playground and sold them for a coin. As long as it wasn't a penny, you could get one gummy strawberry for a coin. And I actually remember I made like $60 on this giant bag of like gummy strawberries. My grandfather, who was visiting from China at the time, he was part of the Communist Party, was pissed. He was like, this kid's lived here for 3 years. He's already a capitalist. And I actually got in like some really big trouble. But I would say that's probably an example early on of entrepreneurship a little bit.
And it wasn't just you selling them, right? Who else was selling them?
Well, I realized I couldn't distribute all of them fast enough. And so I had people both, I like had little bags that I distributed across these gummy dealers, I guess. And part of it was also encouraging these kids to go home and like fish in their couches for coins. So there was like a money gathering component and also like a food distribution component, I guess.
That sounds great. What a way to hustle very early on.
Yeah.
Sounds like you were developing skills.
Well, I wanted to buy a bike. And so I used that money to go buy a bike.
That'll tie in later. We'll just drop a little Easter egg there for a moment. So your mom sounds like a boss. How did she influence your experience of coming into this sector?
So my parents were in the 1977 class of students in China. So during the Cultural Revolution, they like canceled all school for a while. And when they rebooted school, they had this huge nationwide test. And the first class was like 1977. So it was like very few people actually got to go to school. And after they graduated, there was no graduate schools. Lots of people in China went all over the world to go study and get their advanced degrees. My dad was studying winter pavement design, and my mom was a computer scientist. And the University of Minnesota was like the perfect nexus. Like my dad's number one choice was here. My mom's number two choice was here. My mom worked at the University of Minnesota at a place called Shepherd Lab. Shepherd Lab built the algorithms that power email even today. The SMTP protocol was written there. There was GopherNet and GopherMail. And so I hung out at my mom's computer lab and played video games, and her colleagues taught me C and C++, and we had a computer at home when I was like 5 years old, and I broke it a bunch of times. So yeah, there was a lot of what I know about computers and how early I was on the internet. I had an email account in 1991. Mm-hmm. All of that was because of my mom.
Wow. I'm guessing you also learned how to put the computers back together.
No, not until way later. Not until way later. But no, my mom worked at a startup in 1992 when she graduated. I found some old tax returns. They pay engineers way better now. She made like $29,000, something like that, as a software engineer. But that company eventually got bought and became a company called Veritas, and that went public and generated some wealth for my family. So like, I wouldn't call my mom like super risk tolerant, but I think it was the only job she could find, maybe. But there's like some tradition of startups, even when I was a kid.
It sounds like you've been around entrepreneurs your whole life in that way. How would you characterize an entrepreneur? And when did you start to realize that you were an entrepreneur?
So there's this kind of maybe sad story or weird story. The CEO of Veritas, his name was Mark Leslie. Mm-hmm. And sometime in middle school, I was at my mom's office. It was up in Roseville, and he was visiting from California. So their main headquarters were in Mountain View, California. And as a kid, I was like, this is the most amazing company. All the vending machines are free. You just push a button, stuff comes out. And here I am like doing homework in their cafeteria, and it was the afternoon, and I didn't know who he was, but he came and sat down, and he just looked like depressed, like maybe he was at a bad board meeting or something, I don't know. But I walked up and like, excuse me, I don't know who you are, but you look really sad. And like, this place is amazing. Obviously, you've like created this amazing business. Everything's free. You're probably rolling in cash. And I had this like conversation with him, and he asked me what I wanted to do. I was like, well, I want to create something. And we had a conversation about that. And at the end of it, he said something that I never forgot. He was like, you seem like a smart kid. You seem like you can figure out how to, write software. But if you never learn how to sell, you're either going to be building somebody else's dream or you're going to be gambling. And don't forget that selling something is as important as building it. And it wasn't something that inspired me in the moment, but I just remember later in life, I kept coming back to that and thinking about that. And actually, like early in my career as a consultant, I quit and took a sales role where I was selling projects, and everyone thought I was crazy, but it was one of the most important decisions, and it was because of that.
What made that one of your most important decisions?
I think that one of the things that I'm able to do in terms of understanding what product should be built, equal parts of it is figuring out first principles on whether it's possible, and other part is, can I sell it? And I think people that I see, at least that I mentor or that come and talk to me, the businesses they create, either it's not the right time for the tech or it's not the right time for the market. And so I see a lot of failure where it's a great idea, but the technologist isn't there. And you could say that about Next, which is like a Steve Jobs company, to much smaller businesses too. Or it was the right tech, they got it to work, but they couldn't figure out how to sell it. And I think that's something that's really underappreciated. A lot of people have that if you build it, they will come kind of mentality. But actually figuring out how to sell it, even if it's the identical thing, is just as important.
So we're going to jump forward. Like any good entrepreneur, you've had your own twist along the journey and exploration. And we when you saw this, they really talked about a lot of the journey that you're at now at Fulcrum. What is Fulcrum? What initially inspired Fulcrum to exist?
So a lot of the most important things that are made in our society are made by like really large, expensive machines. They're controlled by computers. They're CNC machines, laser cutters. There are machines that can put 50 kilowatts of laser energy to cut a sheet of metal this thick into something that becomes a wall of a fusion reactor prototype. Most of the stuff that's built that's important, from steel beams to really tiny implantable devices, are all done on computerized devices. And at Fulcrum, we call those the mechanical muscles. And there's mechanical muscles all over the place making stuff. Fulcrum is a mechanical mind. We do the same thing for the information and the decisions in a manufacturer as these big machines do for the actual creating of the objects. And so we're everywhere. We're in the shop floor, we're in the office, and we connect all these different parts of the business together. We connect our customers, to their vendors, and all this connectivity live is what allows us to help them make better decisions faster and in a more automated way.
It's interesting to hear you talk about these connections, because talking with you, it sounds like you make connections between a lot of different things. So I can see how that relates
Wrong connections often.
A lot of beautiful connections too. Okay, so and when was the moment that you decided that it was time for Fulcrum to exist?
I kind of started this company in like a very Midwest way. Like I went to Japan in 2014 and watched some monkeys pick bugs off each other, and somehow that inspired me to start a company. But I didn't kind of go whole hog. I had two really good friends of mine that we all played World of Warcraft together. We were all in the #1 ranked World of Warcraft guild for a while. And both of them worked in tech. One was at Google and one was in the intelligence community. And we decided to start a company that was called Atlas, and we were doing consulting work. We were basically building custom software, and we had a bunch of different ideas. We had some software for deep sea fishing companies, and we built software for manufacturers and also for architects and engineers. It was actually at the end of 2019, right before COVID, where there was this really, really, really big fight. Sean, one of the co-founders, just did not have the same conviction about building a product, saw much more of this path where we'd scale the consulting firm, we were making money, why sell parts of the company to go lose money for a while? And so there was that voice. Trevor, had built a timesheet product for architects and engineers that people still use today and still pay money, and is a very stable product, really beautifully built. Meanwhile, I'm over here with my group of 3 or 4 people at the company, just lighting money on fire, building AI schedulers for manufacturers, pulling information out of JobBoss and selling them for $50,000, but spending $1 million training models and stuff like that. And it was a really, really contentious time. I owned half the company; they each owned 25%. And there was a moment where in early 2020, right before COVID was like a thing, I decided to pivot the whole company to this product, bought the 2 of them out, cashed out my 401k, borrowed money from my parents, my in-laws, had no money, literally, and and did that. So that was the moment, and really just felt like if I didn't do that, I would regret it for the rest of my life.
Wow. I was going to ask you what gave you the courage, and it sounds like it was a conviction about it.
I think I had, like, my wife was really supportive at the time too. I had friends that were like really supportive. I had read science fiction books that really helped. I don't know, there's a variety of factors.
How did science fiction books help?
I read a lot as a kid. I was an only child. My parents worked a bunch, but there are a few books. There's a book called Dune, which I'm sure you guys have all seen the movie now, but there's a time in there where the main character, Paul, is able to like see the future and see the past, and he talks about being at this like boiling nexus of understanding how the world is going to work. And it's all these memories. It's kind of a weird book. Like, he has all the maternal memories of all the women in his ancestral chain, but he has this ability to kind of compute the future. And in that book, it talks about how even if you know the future and the past, it still is hard to know what the right thing to do is. And I know that's like a weird thing, but when I didn't know what to do, that was helpful because it helped me understand you might never know what to do. That, and there was a woman named Sylvia Plath. She wrote about how she was standing at the crotch of a fig tree and she was starving because she couldn't choose one fig or the other. But yeah, reading, stuff like that.
Great. See all the connections that he just made?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in the business. We're in Fulcrum. And you have, who was your first customer who got it?
I was thinking about this when you asked, and I don't think it was until like customer 50 that there was one that got it. We thought the first customer got it, and she kind of did. And we thought the second customer did. We thought every customer did. But I think about like a year and a half in, there was a guy, his name was Rod, and he was like the first person that told me what the product was in a different way than I thought what the product was. And it was actually a really kind of a horrible situation. We had sold this guy, his grandfather started the company, his father gave it to him, his father was still kind of operating the business, and this was like his project to kind of get the chops to be able to take the business over. Like, if this succeeded, his dad would feel safe in handing the business over to him. And we had spent, oh my goodness, like 9 months, a year trying to implement him, and it was a disaster. Like, it was not working. And then we had like a way to kind of part ways, but for whatever reason, we decided to try again. We assigned a completely different team to go implement the software. And afterwards, we visited just to do a shop tour, because we do that. He sat me down in his office and like got really emotional and just said, was really grateful that you did that and believed in me and worked on your product. And he said, your product connects all of us together in a way that actually improves our culture. That communication is really what was holding us back. And we're able to do almost twice as much work with the same group of people because we communicate better, we're connected better, things are just working. And I didn't know that's what we built. I had no idea that's what we built. And when you look across our most successful customers, every single one of them, what we're really doing is we're avoiding this coordination tax, this tax that happens when you have more and more people. And that is not something I talked about from the beginning. It's something that we stumbled upon, and it was him that kind of vocalize it in that way. And even when he acts as like a customer reference, he tells other people that too. So
that's amazing. So is he still with you today?
Yeah, I just had a conversation with him last week.
That's amazing. I didn't know that in advance, so I'm really glad the answer was yes. It's good. It says a lot about one of the ways you talked about being good to your customers was generosity. Can you speak more to the spirit of generosity with your customers?
Yeah, I have this belief that I have no proof about that. You see in our space a lot of manufacturers that build software, but they don't understand technology. And so the products don't scale, or they don't really work, or they're unrealistic. The tech's not really there. And there's actually quite a few, they're not competitors, but other products that are in the space that maybe have a small niche audience. And then you have a ton of venture capital dollars poured into businesses where the folks are from the outside and they don't really respect the domain or the trade or the industry. And they end up failing and burning hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in capital. And so I've always thought from the beginning that we have to have some of the smartest, best engineers and product managers and salespeople and marketers, but we also really need them to appreciate and respect this industry and what they do and how complex it is. So that's been kind of our ethos from the very beginning, is to hire people that not only are smart, but also care about this industry in a way that's really important. Well, when you're coming from the outside and you're asking people for a lot of information and you need their help, trust is the most important currency. There's a woman, her name is Brene Brown. She wrote this blog article called The Anatomy of Trust, and she has an acronym called BRAVING. It's boundaries and responsibility and accountability. I think as a business, you get most of those things right, but the G in BRAVING is generosity. It's just giving and giving and giving and not expecting anything back, and that develops an enormous amount of trust. And so especially when you're cash strapped and before you fundraise or after you fundraise and burned all the money, it's really, really easy to look at a spreadsheet and say, how do I make these unit economics work? I don't have to be as generous about stuff. People from finance, like Lou, probably would recommend that from time to time. And there have been times where we've not been able to be as generous as we want to be, but I think there's a strong correlation between that currency of trust, the quality of information we get, the ability for people to take a chance on us, even if we're younger or newer or different. And I think it's about being generous in the sales process, in your product development, in the way you sell. We send really nice boxes of stuff to them and really try to honor them as much as possible.
Thank you, Lou. A few members of, not Lou, Sunny. A few members of Sunny's team are here. Do you want to just wave your hands and we'll give you so thank you for being here today. It's you can see that they sort of light up as well. So it says a lot about a leader by who they choose to have on their team, and also that reciprocity that seems to exist between you and your team.
Maybe they're the only ones to smile. That's quite wrong. Everybody frowns.
So you talked about shaping cultures when you go into these different businesses. Can you share a story of a time that you really saw how your product shaped the culture for the better?
I think the stories that stick with the team are maybe different than the stories that stick with me. The stories that stick with the team seem to be the ones where this person really wants to build these aerospace components, really cares about. There's a company of ours that's in California. They make a lot of components for Blue Origin and SpaceX and all these different businesses. And you go around and there's like little Star Trek doodads everywhere. Like their whole culture is about like this kind of scientific exploration of space. And they talk a lot internally about how the product they use, the systems that they use are really important, but that it really freed up their ownership team to actually have a personal life and be able to look at stuff from home and be able to manage things in different ways, and for their team to be able to handle the stress of the scaling that they're doing so quickly because there's so much kind of space demand. I think that the stories that stick with our team are the ones where people got more balance in their personal lives because of it. I think the most impactful stories are the ones where anybody who's ever tried to scale an organization, whether inside a large company or a kickball league or a company, you realize that once it gets large enough, there's always this tension. And for me, seeing our software get implemented and watching that tension kind of relax and people just collaborating more and working towards the same thing and be able to get twice as far, 3 times as far with the same people, to me, that's really impactful for me.
It sounds pretty amazing. I feel like we could take this at face surface and it's like you work in manufacturing, sort of a SaaS model, but it sounds like you're really building trust between people, helping them to communicate, shaping their culture, and those things are priceless.
Yeah.
So, how do you gain credibility with people on the shop floor?
I think you just ask them questions. We tell that to our sales team all the time. We tell that to our product team. Even if you know the answer, it's not about getting information as much as it is getting perspective. Could be the exact same answer, but the person saying it to you is as important as you gaining the knowledge. When somebody tells you something, even if you already know, and they genuinely believe that they're giving you information, there's a belief then that you know, and they're going to trust you because I told you. Now, if you still mess it up, then you get like double anger from them. But in terms of getting credibility, you have to follow through. But even if you know the answer, your product already does it, even something simple as like not showing it off and tap dancing and instead asking them, what do you think about this? Every single time just gains you credibility every single time.
So important to listen to the people who are on your team, the people who are not only at the leadership level of your customers and the whole team, the people who are actually in the nuts and bolts of it.
Well, as an outsider, you're intimidating. You're wearing not what they wear. You know what I mean? These like Arc'teryx jackets. There's no snow in these shop floors, and you're tech people, and you're giving them something that they don't want to use sometimes, and having somebody who they perceive as an outsider that's intimidating genuinely care about their perspective is not just disarming, it is motivating too.
Sounds like you're changing how they're framing you from an outsider intimidating to how would you frame how you interact with your customers?
Poorly most of the time. I think, I mean, I do think that we are really patient with them. We're very generous with our time. I think we listen to them. But I think also we're also very different. I run the company in a really focused, bursty way that's even tough for our team. Whatever the most important problem is, we're going to blitz that. And once that's not the most important thing, even if there's still more work to do, we're going to switch to something else. And you can feel that as one of our customers from the product improvements that we roll out. And so there's some stress that's there. But in general, we had a user conference, and another person told me, they were like, we go to a lot of user conferences or like sales events, but we started off our user conference this year with a 25-minute presentation on all the performance issues we're having. We were saying, if you're on the cluster 4, you guys are using the product so much that the performance is really bad. We had our engineers come out, talk about what we're going to do about it, how we're going to slow down sales a little bit, all these things we were doing. And we spent a long time just communicating the product isn't performing the way that we want. We're going to improve it. And then we talked about AI and how we thought it wasn't really mature enough. We think it's different now, but I think we're really transparent, really open, really honest and direct with our customers. If the product doesn't fit people, we'll tell them, don't sign the contract, don't buy our product. So I think that directness and transparency, and not transparency where you leave the worst for the end, we kind of start with the worst almost every single time. That's really scary, but has served us really well.
You bring up a couple of points. So one, you talked about science fiction. You talked about Merlin. Can you talk about your role as Merlin with your customers?
Yeah, so we went through this marketing exercise, and our 2 marketing people are here, where we were trying to decide how to talk about our company. And we went through this whole week-long exercise, and the word that I chose was just best. It was just the stupidest thing. But I chose out of the words that were on the board. Anyway, through that process, we're thinking about stuff, and there's a psychologist, philosopher, his name is Carl Jung, and he talks about how there are these psychological archetypes for people. And the one that we settled on is that we think that we fit the role of magician. We make cool things happen that otherwise other people promised would happen but didn't actually happen, or they didn't even know could happen. And if you think about what we are, we don't make anything. We don't actually make any of the stuff. Our customers make the gimbal assembly that makes the rocket be able to land itself. Our customers make the particle accelerator that allows us to find new subatomic particles. We don't make anything. We support them. And so the analogy that I repeat in my head and we talk about sometimes in the team is, we're not King Arthur, we're Merlin. Our job is to give them Excalibur so that they can be the best version of themselves. We can see that they're meant to be King Arthur, and we're trying to build the best version of Excalibur possible. And we're a little aloof. We show up sometimes, we give them a gift, we help them out a little bit, but our job isn't to be King Arthur. And it's so common, I think, especially for tech startups, to put yourself in as the protagonist of the story. But in our case, one of the most important things marketing-wise is to think of ourselves as a really important, powerful supporting member of the story. Our job is to enable them to be the best version of themselves.
I find that really powerful because I feel like a lot of startups put themselves in the role of hero, and that role of Merlin shows a lot about your humility, and also I feel like why you're so powerful. Can you tell us about the first VC term sheet you received? So
like I said, I decided to trash my entire net worth right around COVID, and it was weird. Alex is here. She was in a period of time where we were all not getting paid 1 week at a time. We'd kind of take turns not taking a paycheck. I didn't take a paycheck the whole time, but we got a PPP loan that kind of pulled us forward and allowed us to build some software. But it was a weird time. It was Zoom fundraising for the first time. I'd never fundraised before. I'd always bootstrapped the company. And I talked to, I think, 19 investors. And I thought that was a lot. And I didn't get any term sheets. And I told the team, I'm like, looks like we're going to have to do this on our own. And there was one investor who was, towards the end of his career, about to retire. And he called me up and he's like, hey, why are we not talking anymore? I was like, oh, I don't think anybody has interest. He's like, the people have interest. let me do this. He's like, I'm going to write you a term sheet. Please don't take it. But then you can very credibly go to all of the other investors that are interested and say, I have a term sheet. And I was like, okay. And so then I did. And literally less than 12 hours later, we had 9 term sheets. Like I had no idea where I was in this process. And then, it was me trying to fit everybody in. And that was probably the wrong decision too. But no, yeah, it was a really odd time. I didn't know what I was doing. They didn't kind of know what they were doing with this whole Zoom thing. And it was just the grace and luck of a stranger that kind of put the round together at the last minute.
You give a lot of credit to the people who are around you. It sounded like when you told me that story before that he also acknowledged your authenticity, and that was the reason that he really gave you the term sheet.
Yeah, he said that he didn't think I was someone that would screw him.
Okay.
And, either I was very authentic or like a very good actor. So that was those were the exact words that he used, I think.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. So are you a good actor?
Not maybe.
Okay. So I wanted to share that story to give you a sense of that authenticity. And it sounds like, so we're going to talk about the team a little bit more. How do you build trust? You talk about building trust with your customers. How do you build trust on your own team?
I think if I think about my journey building a team, there are times where decisions I've made, the way that I've acted has lost trust with the team. And I think there's a guy named Charlie Munger. He was Warren Buffett's partner for a long period of time at Berkshire Hathaway. And he has this model where he says that if you really want to figure out how to do something that you don't know how to do, invert. And he gives this example about how he was responsible for keeping fighter pilots out of bad weather. And the task that he made his team do is say, how would we kill all of them? Like where would we make them fly where we would maximize the chances of them dying, and then just do the opposite. And so I try to just keep a list of the ways that I've lost trust and try to do the opposite. And the ways that I've lost trust is not making a decision fast enough, not taking responsibility for a decision, pushing it onto other people when I don't want to make a decision, trying to explain something when I just need to say this is what happened, or not being transparent even though I think I'm being transparent. I do this thing where I say all these, details. I had some bad yogurt and had diarrhea, whatever, all these things that are very like open and transparent, but I don't actually say the one thing I should say, which is, I don't know what I'm doing right now, and I need your help to like figure it out. I think when you learn all the things that get people to not know what's going on, or not trust you, or not trust each other, when we siloed the team because we just needed everybody to do a bunch of different things, there's all these different decisions that seemed okay in the moment that in retrospect you can tell eroded the trust with each other or between me and the team. And I just have like a long document that has literally 100 lines in it. And regularly I try to look at it and say, okay, I have to do the opposite of that. So
you just named a lot of ways that you haven't built trust in the past. Can you share with us a few ways that you have built trust?
So we do a weekly town hall. Half our team is remote. And for a while it was like, oh, we need to highlight other members of the team and do demos and stuff. And I'm not trying to say like leaders should be megalomaniacs or they're the only ones like on the stage, but for a long period of time, I would explain my thoughts. We're going to fundraise. I'm a little scared. Here's why. Here are the metrics that make sense. Here's some hype. Here's like some customers that I'm talking to. And I always thought that was like kind of useless. And for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, 1.75 years, we didn't do that. And recently, about a year ago, maybe 6 months ago, I had a few people just say, we missed that. Like we miss being plugged into that. And so I think authentically sharing thoughts and what I'm thinking, even if uncertainty is what's on my mind, is really important. I think people, at least people that will succeed at startups, would rather know something's going on and what the CEO's thoughts are than only knowing when the answer is complete. And so I think one of the things that I tend to do is I tend to wait until I have a fully formed answer before explaining it. But that kind of in-process explanation, even if there's no way for them to influence you, still brings people along for the journey.
Definitely. We have people on for the journey today from your team. It's great. Okay, so I wanted to talk about people that you've hired. You've mentioned Alex, who's here today. Thank you for being here. As some people you've hired, so I'm curious about both people you've hired, and you talk about this flywheel of culture. You have people who've progressed that flywheel, and you've also had made some choices about who not to continue on your team because it seems that they weren't taking care of the culture in the same way.
Yeah.
You want to share more about that?
No, I do think that there's something that I really underestimated, which is this momentum, this flywheel. Like the flywheel analogy is that you have to put a lot of energy into it just to get it to spin a little bit. But because it's so heavy, the momentum will carry you even when you get into a moment where you don't have the energy to invest into the flywheel. You're storing effort that you did in the past. And there were 2 moments in our company's history where we were growing too fast, which, you know, if you're a startup founder, you might be like, well, that's not a bad problem. But we went from like 10,000 in ARR to $1 million in less than 9 months. And we went from that to 2.7 in 6 months. We just sold all the wrong people and everybody wanted the product, but it wasn't fully built. And there was a moment in 2022 where we just kind of stopped. We like halted everything, slowed everything down. And it was probably the responsible thing to do. Maybe it wasn't. But the act of getting that booted back up again was really, really painful. Because what I didn't in my mind, I don't know why I thought this. I was like, oh, we have more people. So more people to flywheel. But it's the people are the flywheel. So the more people you have, the more energy you got to put into it to get it to go again. And that was like a really important lesson. And I think that there are people that can be, I've always known that there are people that can be really, really talented that are kind of assholes that you don't want on the team. But there's also people that are really talented, work really hard, that aren't assholes, but don't have the same values as you, that also are really, really painful to part with, but are really, really valuable to think about whether or not, be thoughtful about whether or not they should be on part of the team. One of the things that I've discovered that's really counterintuitive is that a really strong culture is fundamentally exclusive. A really inclusive culture is fundamentally really exclusive. If your culture becomes non-exclusive, you don't really have a culture. You have just a random statistically representative sample of the population that you drew from. Culture is something that is orthogonal, different, exclusive from normal social culture, which means that you have to exclude certain people. And if you hire just based on skill, you can have a meritocracy, but no culture. And that concentration of values and culture, that exclusivity, is in itself its own flywheel. Because, you know, one of my mentors, Yishan, who's on the board, he talks about this vortexing. He was one of the first engineering managers at Facebook and was the CEO of Reddit. It's like when you have that kind of cultural flywheel, you try to hire someone that's really good, but they don't fit, the team's going to vortex them right out. And they're going to select better people, and you just got to worry less, and they're going to onboard faster, and they're going to do all these things. And so I think there's that as well. And just like the productivity flywheel, the more people you have, the more energy you got to put in to like get it booted again. The people are the flywheel.
And how do you do that? How do you put more energy into it?
You just have to.
Okay, great.
I don't know. It's really, really difficult, mostly because it's like a chore when it's not going, and you like kind of take it for granted when it is. Like when it's working, you're like, oh, it's always going to be like this. And then when it's not, you're like, I got to put so much effort in for so little, but you just got to do it. Yeah.
Great. It's something that I admire about you is that you're both a learner and you really focus on emotional intelligence. Can you give us a little background on how that's played such a big role for you? And we'll have this be our closing question before we we'll do a quick Q&A and then ask the audience to just start to think about your own questions too.
I would say that if you ask my team, everybody would say I learn too much and I emotionally intelligence too little. I tend to love to really understand stuff, and I like to know things before I make decisions. I'm also good at making like rapid fire decisions, but I think it's the people that you work with that end up giving you the signals on what to do when. For me, at least personally, I have a hard time learning and also absorbing signals from the team. For me, it's like one or the other. I'm either talking to the team and like seeing what's going on and talking to customers, or I'm like deeply delving into, how GD&T glyphs are actually created by different pieces of software so we can use AI to parse it out, and, going really deep on fine-tuning our own models. And for me, it's like I really have this inertia Whereas I'm learning something and I'm progressing, I want to keep going and keep going and keep going. And I resent people, even people that I trust, from like switching lanes, to the point where my team like has a hard time. They're like, oh, he needs to change, but like he's like kind of going. And so for me, it really is about changing gears. I feel like I'm losing so much momentum, but I have to remind myself to like kind of balance both those things out. I used to try to do like half the day this, half the day that. For me, that doesn't work either. But it is about like asking people, hey, where are we? Like, how are people feeling? What should I be thinking about? Where should I be spending my time? Being a filter, not a sponge. You can't just do what everybody says. But in the aggregate, the team will tell you when you're doing one or the other not well enough.
So we're going to be a filter for these last questions. Okay. Some emotional intelligence, some fun. Okay. So what's your favorite way to commute?
I think what you're like, I'm lucky. My wife actually drives me into the office and drives me back every day. But during COVID, I bought a scooter that goes like 46 miles an hour. And I live near Cedar Lake, and I take the Greenway and go 46 miles an hour on the Greenway and then come up by Dunwoody and go downtown. And back then there was no traffic. I would go on 394 and just get up on after Dunwoody and get off on Penn. Can't do that anymore. But yeah, if you saw somebody with a onesie and a helmet going down 394, roughly like April 2020, that was probably me.
Nice. And what's your favorite onesie?
There's one that looks like I know how to ski, but I don't. That's my favorite one. It's got a bunch of patches and stuff.
Great. So now when you're on 394, and there's, you know what to look for.
Yeah.
Hopefully not on 394 anymore. Okay. So what is your essential daily practice?
I take a shower twice a day, morning and night. And I just remind myself 40 years ago, there was no hot showers. I don't know why that's important, but I take a 10-minute hot shower twice a day and just tell myself somebody built all this stuff so that hot water comes on your head. And yeah, oddly motivating.
Great. And something else that sounds motivating is food. If you could have any meal tonight, what would you have?
I want some soup. It's kind of chilly.
It is. It's entering fall. Okay. Why the Twin Cities?
I traveled a lot as a consultant before, all around the world, all around the country. And this is probably not a good way to make decisions, but every city I was in, I was like, is this better than Minneapolis? And the answer was just kind of no a lot of the time. There's like a city called Coeur d'Alene in northern Idaho. There's nothing there, but it's beautiful. I like that city a lot. I considered moving to Wichita at some point in time because they were the first to get Google Fiber. But outside of that, I think that I work harder in the winter because there's nothing to do and it's cold. And I really enjoy the ethos of the people that I work with, and many of them are here.
Beautiful. And if you could identify an opportunity for the Twin Cities, what would it be? Specifically the startup ecosystem.
I'll be talking about this on Thursday in a very angry way, but I think that relatively the amount of effort to do something that could be worth $1 trillion is roughly the same as $1 billion. And we don't go big enough. And when we fail, we go back to Target or General Mills. And when someone fails and we're at Target, we kind of say, that's the reason we shouldn't go start something. And we don't ask people, what are you doing next after they fail? We tell them, oh, how can I help you transition in this time of toughness or whatever it may be? And all of those little things just erode the amount of talent that we have and how much energy is put into new things versus transferring data from one spreadsheet to another to make sure there's enough cereal on the shelf. So I think that there's a lot of talent here, a lot of ambition. And it's not that people are risk averse. I used to think that. I think we just have a culture of like not going big enough and also not supporting people's failures.
Thank you for all of that quick insights. Opening it up for questions. We have about 5 minutes left.
First 5 customers, why do you think they did business with you?
I think I sold them on a vision that I wasn't even sure about, and I did it in a compelling enough way that they couldn't not do it. There's one of our early customers where she told me like multiple times, even as, again, we have a really big product. We promised a lot, took a long time, and she stayed with us for like 2+ years. And I remember visiting her and just saying, why didn't you like cut bait? She's like, the way that you described how my business could be was so compelling that I knew you didn't have anything, but I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I just wanted it. And I think that story was told in many different ways by many of our first 15, 20 customers.
Go.
Were you intrinsically interested in manufacturing, or did you go into supporting that industry because there was opportunity?
I know we're recording this, and I don't mean to be like ungrateful at all, but a long time ago, my first job was actually working with the SBA pretty closely in 2008, 2009, and that was a bad time for a lot of businesses. And I remember I was covering manufacturing as well as construction and car dealerships, but one time I was assigned to this kind of failing plumber. And I remember him asking the same thing, like, how did you become passionate about poop? And he was like, I didn't want to, but when you know something and you know how to make it better, you become passionate about it. And there's this like, general feeling that I have that I talk to the team about is that curiosity leads to learning, learning leads to mastery, and then that mastery is what leads to passion. And I think that was the road for me. Like, I was just curious. I was like, I didn't know. I always thought that like you wanted a rocket, you have a rocket building, metal goes in and rockets poop out. And that's not how it works at all. And so it wasn't, and I just asked a lot of questions and I started to understand stuff. And then I started to be able to have answers and be able to help and be able to make an impact. And then I started seeing things at a much larger scale because a lot of these folks work really hard and never go visit other shops. And I'd seen 300-400 different shops over a period of time. And then I started to say, okay, manufacturing is very foundational, very important. And if this thing that I think could happen, like it could change the entire civilization. And that's something that's like scary, but also easy to get passionate about. And so for me, it was really like, oh, that's not how it works. Why? And I get it. And because I get it, I can do something. And because I can do something, I'm good at it. And when I'm good at it, that opens you up to feeling like you deserve to have like a vision about something. And that's what that created it. So it is intrinsic now, I will admit that, but it wasn't from day one. What was intrinsic was this was big and interesting, and I was curious about
Go ahead.
When you go back to those days when you were starting out on your own on the product direction, is there anything that in retrospect you wish you had done differently?
Oh, yes. Wish I hadn't nested invoices under sales orders, and there's a bunch of technical things, a bunch of technical details that we missed. But the thing that I always thought was, I watched a lot of Star Trek as a kid, science fiction, and there's an episode of The Next Generation called Tapestry, in which Captain Picard has an artificial heart, and he's going to die. And this omniscient, godlike figure named Q says, you want to go back in time and prevent this bar fight you had as a kid when you were like a lot more rambunctious. And Captain Picard is like this very stoic, serious person. And he says yes, and he goes back. He avoids this fight, and he gets teleported back into present, and he's no longer the captain. He's like a science officer, and he's talking to everybody that he knows. And he's like, well, do you think I have like command potential? And they're like, oh, not really. You never take any risk. And really at the end of it, he's like, I would rather die than live this life that isn't my own. And his final phrase is something like, there are all these threads that you can tug on in your life, but you find that when you tug on some of them, it unravels the entire tapestry of your life. So I really encourage the team to say, think about how far we've gotten. And yeah, we made a ton of mistakes, but those mistakes allowed us to go fast, and that speed got us to where we are, and that speed got us our funding that then allowed us to build this thing and be able to see different things that we didn't know from the beginning. And so I try really not like hard to push the team against look at all these mistakes we've made, because it's really, really easy. It's really easy when you have to fix a bug that you didn't create and be like, why the hell do we do it this way? And I'm not trying to like not answer your question, but it's something where if you've gotten something and you've built it, there's nothing in life more important than the fact that you created something, no matter other than being unethical. But there's no other constraints you should put on how you got there.
Do you have a land and expand motion with the manufacturers? Once you sell into it, you sell more?
No, that's a big problem. We have an all-you-can-eat buffet, literally. Like one of our biggest value propositions is you use Fulcrum, you don't have to hire another person or buy another machine, and you'll make 40% more stuff. So the typical sales motion for manufacturers is seat-based. Well, we lose out, right? Like you get all the benefit and we don't. We're moving to like a revenue-based thing, so it kind of auto-expands as they grow, which puts a lot of risk if the industry contracts, so we're thinking through that. But we have some other products we're going to sell them now. We'll have some expand. But if there's one thing that you ask any of our VCs, oh my goodness, the retention is really good. Customers are happy. It's a really novel, differentiated product. But where's the expansion? that's a struggle for us right now.
'Cause, one thing that occurs to me, I might be wrong into customers, is that it seems to me that at least some manufacturers will be relatively unsophisticated consumers of software and with maybe not the deepest pocket shallow margins. So then by thinking about how you sell them or how you price them, so that they do continue to invest on an ROI case basis.
I would say that they're incredibly unsophisticated buyers of change, but they're extremely sophisticated buyers of technology. Remember, if you don't have a computerized CNC, you don't have a manufacturing shop. And that wave of innovation happened in 1980. And I think there's a statistic that says from 3M that says in 1987, 71% of all computer programmers programmed CNC machines. The first very, very prevalent programming language out of COBOL and Fortran was G-code to program these machines. And so there's a culture of, if you don't buy technology, you're out. If you buy the wrong one, you're also out. So they're very skeptical. But I think even without forms and RFQs and all this other crap, they're actually extremely sophisticated, connoisseured buyers of technology.
But maybe more at the core facing, if like CAD software, maybe that would work. But then aren't you more in the admin layer?
The first databases were for manufacturers. The first relational database was for Toyota. Well, Polaris, they made a bunch of missiles in England, but Toyota's production system was the first relational database that Oracle stole. Every single manufacturer, there's actually a company here in Minnesota called JobBoss that built relational databases for small $1 million manufacturers. Their first product was in DOS in 1982. And so it's really not that commonly known, but that industry bought all sorts of software technology first, long before anyone else. Computerized vision systems, databases, AI automation, manufacturing first. Very, very sophisticated.
So we're out of time for today. Sunny will have time for questions afterwards. Yeah. And we wanted to thank you so much for coming today to learn more about Sunny's journey from selling strawberry gummies all the way to helping to shape civilization, whether that was done as onesie on a scooter or by creating flywheels both for progress and for culture. So thank you so much, Sunny. Anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you.
Thank you.